So today I'm going to do something very interesting. I'm going to prove to you today in the existence of spirits. Now, in the old times, we used to use the word ghost and spirit as the same. Okay? But no longer, as our language has evolved, do these quite mean the same thing. And the reason is because we've turned ghost into that paranormal activity alone. So when we speak of ghost, we're talking about haunted house. We're talking about something that can pick an object up and throw it across the room, something that comes from another dimension and can communicate with you and speak with you. And there are some similarities in the definition of spirit and ghost, but they're very different. So getting away from ghost and going back to spirit, I would like to show you how we use the word spirit in today's day. Okay, we use the word spirit in sentences like, I was filled with the spirit of joy, for example. Right? The spirit of joy, or the spirit of desire, spirit of lust. It could be anything, right? Spirit of something that's motivating you. Now, this word spirit can be replaced with something like emotion or character or personality. In this context, when we're talking about the spirit of joy, we are talking about these kinds of words. And the cool thing about words, and I learned this in the TAFE class many years ago, we somehow got into talking about the energies of words, specific words. And you can say the same word with a different form, meaning the same thing, but because you use this word instead of that word, it will inspire different surrounding thoughts because of the stimulus of that word. So something like emotion will not inspire the same thoughts, the same universe of thoughts as the word spirit. When you think of the word spirit of joy, in this case, you're thinking of something like filled with the actions, with the activity, as if you are joy itself. Okay? If you say you're filled with the emotion, you're talking more about feeling joy, the experience and the feeling of joy. But these aren't even separate at all. See, because if you are the character of joy, you are feeling the perspective, you are fully emoted into the perspective of joy. Because you can ask yourself, a joyful person or joy himself, how does a joyful person act? How does joy himself act? If joy was a person, how would he respond in certain situations? Ask yourself that. And you'll find a psychological base that you can point into different environments, different scenarios, and see how joy would react. Same with lust, desire, or any other emotion or spirit. Okay. So you can ask the question, how is this proof of spirits? We can understand spirits by going into these areas, okay? Now, immediately, you should see a link between personality and character, because if you have a character in a book, you have a main character, you can ask yourself the question, what is that main character like? What is their character? And when you say the word, what is someone's character, when you say that phrase, you're talking about what makes them, right? The same thing can be said about personality. Personality is what makes Joe, Joe, right? His personality. That's what brings him to life. That's what gives his character. When you start to talk about synonyms, you start to see crossover. But again, these words carry a universe of thought alongside with them, right? So in the word personality is the word person and persona, because this is what makes this, and they're one and the same, except a person usually has a body and a personality does not. It's what animates the body. So now, if you've thought of the movie Inside Out, this is probably one of the best things ever to come out in the last decade or so when it comes to children's movies, because it's super insightful and super accurate. Because inside of you are all of these guys. Okay? You have anger, joy, sadness, right? It's a very basic way of thinking about emotions because we're only using the main ones to express that story. But in reality, there's many, many, many emotions inside of you, and they are mixtures of each other. So if you've got something like greed, it's fear of loss, and it's hunger and desire and drive, and so it feels like a whole bunch of emotions that make up this mega emotion. So these are all inside of you, and they run your brain. They run everything that you do, and they each have a revealed personality, because an emotion actually is a personality, a type of personality. So if you have a sad person, you're describing much of what their personality is. How do they act in this situation? How do they act in that situation? Think about it. Alongside of the emotion is a personality. So when you think that they're emotions in their head, because that's what you're thinking, you could also be like the different personalities in their head, the different types of people that you're made up of, right? The different types of characters that you're made up of. And then at the same time, you could say the different spirits of the mind, the different spirits that live inside of you, the spirit of sad, the spirit of wrath, the spirit of joy, right? And so you're starting to see how these are all actually the same. In order for me to prove spirits, I'd have to ask, well, what would be reasonable to prove that to you that these exist? Okay? We live in a very material world, very, very material culture, and it's going to be very hard to convince anyone that spirits exist. But I don't need to prove emotion. I don't need to prove character. I don't need to prove personality. I don't need to prove the existence of greed. Right? I don't need to prove the existence of sad. Right? But let's run it through a materialist lens. Where is greed? We'll get back to that one. Where is sad? Now this might be answered by you very quickly as, oh, it's in your mind, it's in your physiological being. And so we can measure it. We can see in your mind when you are sad, we can actually look at the brain and see sad occurring. We can see a certain chemical experience. We can see all these things, and those equal to sad. So we know that sad exists. Okay. It's really rough because sad is not the chemical. That is a part of the process in how it's experienced, but sad is actually not that at all. So when you hear a song, you're listening to music, okay? You're listening to music, and you say, oh, this song is sad. Weird. I'll show you why it's weird. Because then you're looking at someone's face. You're looking, and you see a person, and you say to yourself, wow, that person's sad. A very obvious and simple question comes to my mind. What in the sight and the sound are the same? What in the sight, in what you're seeing and what you're hearing are the same? Because you've called both of these things sad. Have you not? You said that person's sad. I can see they're sad by the look on their face, because that's what you're going off. and you're saying, I'm listening to music and I can hear that it's sad. And let's say it didn't have lyrics, because the lyrics would give it, meaning. We're just listening to the sound, and the song sounds sad. How on earth do we get this category where we can apply sound and visual to? Any idea? There is no answer. There is nothing in the sight and the sound that are the same. They have no similarities. Yet they are able to be put in the same category, in the same place, in emotion, in a character, in a personality. And that, my friend, is what you call the spirit of sad. The thing that embodies the sound, the music, and the thing that embodies that person's face is the spirit of sound, and how we colloquially use it and how we've always used it, even in ancient times. It's just that ancient times used to have this word attached as well, the ghost, and that has become the paranormal as well, because those two things were much more tightly mixed together. And it's very funny because here's one of the things I always thought to myself. Oh, we said we'd get back to greed. I will get back to greed in a second. But here's one of the things I always thought to myself. I always thought that psychology was secretly... I've always thought to myself that psychology was secretly spirituality in disguise. Psych. Right? Psychology. In the word is psyche. And what does it mean to destroy your psyche? If someone's psyche is damaged, what does that mean? I'll tell you. They have a damaged spirit / soul. Really, it's more soul than spirit. But conversations of the soul are spiritual in nature. Okay? So how does this and this mean the same thing? A damaged psyche and a damaged soul. Well, it's funny because, like I said to you, it was my instinct, it was my inclination, since I knew all of this, that this is a spirit. It's not something you can touch. It's not something you can point at. It's not something you can identify in the world materially and test. You cannot do it. And we'll get to that with greed in a second. So here, we're talking about sad. We're usually talking in the conversation of psychology. So since I know that about the emotions, that emotions is psychology, you know that as well, then drawing that link to spirituality and emotions it sticks out to you. And so that was my inclination. The word psyche is an old Greek word that means soul. And so psychology, log, meaning the logic, this is the logic of the soul. Amazing. It is spirituality. I always thought it was weird. Psychology is such a weird field of science because we allow for so much non-material information to creep into our scientific research. It is in essence not material, okay? And the materialists are convinced, and most atheists are materialists, and all materialists are atheists, and they're convinced of the existence of only material things. But spirit and emotion, and motivation, and all those things, telos, they live in a place outside of the material. So for example, greed. Now we're here. Where is greed? Greed is like this. Someone took some ham. Okay, they've taken some pieces of ham. That doesn't mean you're greedy. It means you're hungry, or means you need to move the ham. We have no idea what you needed. Okay, we have no idea the reasoning. But if I told you this, if I said to you, there was two people equally hungry, they sat down for lunch, ate together, they're friends, and one grabbed 8 out of 10 pieces of ham, and the other one grabbed 2 out of 10 pieces of ham. The one who didn't get as much might think the other person might be greedy. Why do they think that? Where is it found? Is it in the taking of the ham? Is it the fact that he grabbed 8 out of 10? So him grabbing 8 pieces of ham equals greed? Or is it in relation to the out of 10? Or is it in combination with the fact that both are hungry? Or is it in combination with that there are 2? Or have I said all of this to show you that it's not one thing alone that creates this here? It's not. The way we figure out whether someone is greedy or not is a culmination of facts. Maybe he was just tired that day. Maybe he was on a higher dose of medication that day. He didn't realize how he was acting. He was a bit out of it. Maybe he was drunk. But let's say they go out again and he does the same thing. What do you have? A repeat instance. A higher chance that what is at play here is this guy, this character, this spirit, this energy, this emotion, this desire, this motivation, right? This person, greed, might be at play. And the only way that we can determine those things is not through material, it's through context. And context is a nice modern word for story. Now, story in our modern time is seen as a human invention. But is this? Is context? Is that a human invention? No? No, context just is a thing that exists. Right? But story, that's us. And remember I told you that words have a universe of thoughts and feelings attached to them. This is going on right now, right in front of you. When you're thinking of story, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of myth, once upon a time, right? But story is not just something you tell each other. It's also the context. This is story in reality. So if we get context, you have an action and you get the context surrounding it, you've got the story. And in story, these are revealed. So what am I saying? Something like greed and sad can only be revealed through the context of everything. It's not a note. It's not a particular muscle on your face. It's not one attribute. It's the context. It's the story that surrounds it. Right? In story is the spiritual, is the emotional, is everything when it comes to the non-material.